This is the heart of the mountains. There is little here that spells civilization. Here at the southern end of the Appalachians, a place has been set aside. Here, man and nature are not in conflict, but in harmony. This harmony of man and nature was one of the goals realized in the autumn of 1940. Then a vast tract in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee and North Carolina was dedicated as a national park. As President Franklin D. Roosevelt said, "To the free people of America, I dedicate this park." This is the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. This, the 21st National Park of America, borders Tennessee and North Carolina, which means that over 120 million people are within 700 miles of the park, as this radius shows. But although the Smokies are only a day's drive away from 2/3 of the nation's population, nearness alone would not explain the powerful attraction that draws more than 5 million visitors to these mountains each year. Certainly, Great Smoky Mountains National Park must have a wide range of attractions and facilities to draw such a large number of visitors. Just what is it they find here? They find 800 miles of some of the nation's most beautiful wilderness, a kaleidoscope ranging from the 6,000-foot peaks of Mount LeConte and Clingman's Dome to the rugged forests below. This is a land rich in beauty, rich in waterways, 600 miles of stream and river. To preserve and protect the beauty of this area, the Park Service moved into the Smokies. Theirs is a double job: to administer the care of the park with its resources and wildlife, and to give assistance and guidance to park visitors. Visitor centers, such as Sugarlands, have been set up to aid the park's visitors and inform them about the area's resources and the necessary park regulations. The rewards of this cooperative program are evident. Today, visitors to Great Smoky will enjoy every facility that the park offers. Tomorrow, new visitors will find these same facilities available, unmarred by human carelessness or thoughtlessness. Cooperation makes it possible. The pioneer heritage of the Smokies is a living thing. The new generations of mountain folk live on in communities like Cades Cove. The old structures are maintained, and many, the cable mill as an example, are still in use. The mountaineers' legacy to the Smokies is no museum piece, but a living thing that continues as surely as a stream. Skilled pioneer hands built this home. The skilled hands of their descendants have kept it in its original condition. Materials, such as roofing shingles or shakes, are still cut by hand with froe and mallet from solid bolts of oak, just as it was done a century ago. Likewise, many mountain families still spin their own wool yarn from the wool of their own sheep and weave or knit it into garments themselves. The independent mountain families still carry on the old ways in farming the land. Sorghum, an important crop, is still crushed by horsepower into juice and pulp. On the other hand, there are a few show-offs in every crowd, and the animal kingdom is no exception. The black bear often behaves very much like a spoiled child, continually trying to gain the attention of human visitors. Of all the park's year-round inhabitants, The bears are the most sociable, playful, and adventurous. Generally, they aren't upset by the presence of people and concentrate on having a good time. It is a violation of park regulations to feed, tease, frighten, or molest the bears in any way. The people who visit Great Smoky can also concentrate on having a good time. The park offers 17 camping areas, like the popular Elkmont. From the convenience of a campsite, visitors enjoy several forms of recreation. The abundant waterways have made the stream sides a favorite with many visiting families. Here they can refresh themselves by relaxing in the summer sun, or by taking a cooling dip in the clear waters from the mountains. Many a visitor to Great Smoky has found still another attraction in these clear rivers and streams. For the waters are the haunts of trout. In such a setting, a person might never tire of the thrill of angling for them. Even when you haven't had a good strike all morning, there's something satisfying about being able to just relax out here in the open with a good rod and a good friend.
The way things used to be back in the early years of our country, most folks did a lot of living outdoors, camped along the trail, roughed it, you might say. It was a necessary way of life. Most all our land was wild, virgin territory. There were mighty few towns or settlements, and they were right in the middle of the wilderness country. If you're a father like me, you probably remember how it used to be. And you'd like your children to see how it was when you were young. Experience that kind of independent feeling that comes from living outdoors. Did you ever get a hankering to get out in the open, see animals and their natural surroundings, sort of get away from it all? Sure you have. That's why camping and travel has become one of the fastest growing fun sports of our time. The majority of people in our country live in big cities. As time goes, folks will be living in metropolitan areas. Things have changed. Where most people used to live in the country and go to the city for fun, now they live in the city and head for the country on vacations. Well, it's sure easy enough to do if you want to. The perfect answer is camping out. Just about everybody's got a car. The road systems leading to camping areas are excellent. And the fact is, there are more good park systems to camp in now than ever before. Only thing you really need is some basic camping equipment, and you're all set. Both heading for the kind of country you'd go for, the Great Smoky Mountains. The number of national park and state campsites available for family camping is increasing each year, and there are plenty to go around. You'll find them in just about every state in the Union, anywhere you want to go. Here in the Smokies, you can stay up to 2 weeks, so you want to get just the right spot for your tastes. There's all kinds of sites, by rivers, wooded, open, hilly, all of them are good. One thing's for sure, you'll find the other campers mighty friendly, and you'll have a lot in common. I tell you, setting up camp nowadays with all this modern equipment is real easy. even if you've never done it before. Of course, things are a lot easier, too, than they used to be. Why, you can have all the comforts of home if you want them. Nice gas stove, portable ice box, lantern, cooking things and all. No dishes to do, though. Use paper, throw them away. Point is, the things you need don't cost very much. But you sure find campers that go all the way with the most modern equipment. Hey there. That's one thing almost everybody takes along. Suntan lotion. You know, there are camping areas like this all over the country. That water is going to feel mighty refreshing. There just isn't anything like a cool, fast-running mountain stream. Add an air mattress, and it's more fun than hunting possum. The Smokies are just like every other national park I've seen. So many hiking and horse trails and things to do and see that you could spend a month and not do it all. Hey, look at that. I told you those two kids would be friends. The boy's family invited the girl to go with them. That happens a lot when you're camping. In the Smokies, it's Clingman's Dome, the highest point in Tennessee. Let me tell you, it's way up there. It's a lot of fun traveling up a mountain in the summertime. It's cool up there. This is the kind of sight you'll remember a long, long time. Things like this are just sitting and waiting all over the country. After Clingman's Dome, you can drive into the valley to Cades Cove and see just how people lived and farmed back in the frontier days. While you're there, you might as well take advantage of some of those fine riding horses, too. Gatlinburg, Tennessee. It's just outside the park. Of course, that's one of the reasons you go camping, to see all the sights in the area, as well as enjoy that relaxing outdoor life. Sure, you're saving money, but it doesn't mean you can't come out of the woods once in a while and be a tourist. Just like every other park area, there's a whole lot of things to do. And Gatlinburg is more fun than a square dance and a quilting bee all rolled into one. A ski resort can be just as much fun in the summer as it is in the winter. Riding up that ski lift is something. Looks like you're gonna go clear up to the clouds. And then when you start down, what a view. When you get down to that last night's campfire, you realize just how much fun you had, how much you're going to miss your friends.
We're happy where we are. We're camped in the Smokies.
And if you're a parent, you'll have that good feeling of knowing your child just a little bit better. Camping is a way of bringing people together somehow. I can guarantee you this.
On top of Old Smoky, all covered with snow. And once you have come here, you'll never want to go.
the late 18th century, a widow woman by the name of Jane Ogle and all her children wandered into a little valley on the northern edge of a mountain range, in what was then the unsettled eastern part of an area soon to be called Tennessee. Upon arriving, she fashioned a rough house out of the abundant forest timber nearby, cleared a small plot of land to grow food for her family, and erected a barn to store the food she had grown. Being a poor woman and having recently lost her husband, Jane was looking for a place to build a new life without the encumbrances of the New World society. Upon completion of her house and barn, that was all she thought she'd achieved. Jane had no way of knowing at the time that in addition to building a new home, she had also begun building the gateway for what would be 200 years later, the most visited mountain resort area in the entire world. Jane Ogle had commenced building Gatlinburg, Tennessee, the magnificent entrance to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
The nature of the mountaineer demands that he have solitude for the unhampered growth of his personality, wing room for his eagle heart. No one can understand the attitude of our Highlanders toward the rest of the earth until he realizes their amazing isolation from all that lies beyond the blue, hazy skyline of their mountains. There are still people who remember.
Seemed like man gets to thinking about it, we're always talking about the good old days. And you've heard the expression, we live back in the good old days. Well, that's right. It may be good old days 100 years from now. I don't know, looking now. But it ain't nothing like it used to be when I was a boy. Although we did hit it hard. You talk about money. Money is just about something that you didn't have. We had to work. We all depended on wood, too, up there. And there was no coal, there was no oil, there was nothing except firewood, you might say. So if a person got sick with the flu or got sick with something that he couldn't do his own wood getting, then we would all gather up and get him wood up, maybe enough to do him a week or so. Maybe in that time we'd hope that he would be out. Then when we'd come to our farming, we find that help one another with the crops.
Girls on this side, boys over here. That's the way they did in the old days. Boys, girls. 1882. I was wondering if anybody was really looking. 1882. Well, if it was built in 1882, then how old is the schoolhouse? 91 years old, right.
We eat 3 meals a day. Of a morning at 6, and 12 o'clock of a day, and 5 of evening, 5:30, something like that. I can do it on the fireplace where I can't do it on an electric stove, for I don't even know how to operate one. I guess if you had a stove, you could regulate it more, but if you're used to the fireplace, you can just regulate it too. If you're used to it, you're used to it. It's just like cooking on the stove, these women today. And I've cooked on that for years. Best food in the world. You use hickory wood, most of the time green wood, so you'll have hot coals. And heat controls, if you'll just fix it right and have plenty of hot coals, that's what you need. You can control it by pulling your stuff out here on the hearth. That's where you cook it, but you have your coals real hot. Well, I'm cooking cornbread, and it come from the farm, ground, made. And then my sweet potatoes, I raised them on the farm, and I boiled them and then put sugar on them and butter and baked them. my dumplings, I go raise the hen and cut her head off with the axe, pick the feathers off and swings the hairs off, put her in the pot and boil her. And my beans, I raise them in the garden, bring them out, string them, hang them on the wall and dry them. Then I soak them overnight and take my fatback meat, which we raise, and put them in the pot, and I boil them about 4 hours or till they get tender. So then I have hominy, which we grow the corn, and I take the drip lye out of the ashes I burn in my stove and skin these skins off. It takes several washings. And when I get that done, then I can it or what for the winter. I guess he'd run me off if I didn't have beans about every day. Beans or, he don't like peas too good. So I'll just have to say we have to have beans about every day. Beans and potatoes is the main thing on the farm. If you ain't got that, why, you might have trouble.
I realize it now and have for the last few years. When I had to move out of this park, I had a grudge, you know, for some time. But then I got over that when my eyes began to be opened. I began to wake up then to the beauty of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park that was once my home, and now I still cherish it as the grandest place on earth.
The roaming man of the Smoky Mountain, because I've been a guide all my life to fishermen, hunters, and so forth. And before the park, National Park, was ever talked of. My daddy sent me out at 8 years old, and I've been a guiding ever since. But then later the park come about, and so they gave me a badge, #1 guide, because I knew the Smokies and the trails, and I hoped lay out all the boundary line. And seeing as I was here before the park ever was thought of. I've had lots of experience. One time I had went over a mountain to a logging camp, was cutting timber, and they wouldn't give me a job because I was too young. Said, boy, we could use you. The man said, but said, you're too young, and it's a violation of law, and said, you'll have to go back home and wait a few years. Now, a lot of people wants to know if I ever got lost. Of course, I've never exactly been lost, but I've been bothered for 2 or 3 days a few times. But I got out. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have been here. But now they're going to tell you about getting lost. I know a man that was lost. He was missing for 2 years, and I'd passed their home. This old lady'd cry and said, Wiley, be on the lookout for my husband somewhere in the Smokies. You might run on his bones, and if you'd find a skeleton, well, let me know. But 2 years later, they found a skeleton, and he was identified. These bones was by a gun and watch and a little bit of change. And they brought him in and buried him. Now that man was really lost. Maybe I'll tell you a little about the bears out in the mountain. I've met lots of them. And that's what I tell the tourists when they ask me what to do in case you meet one on a trail. I tell them stand still for a little while, and if that bear don't run, why, for them to run. And you'll have no trouble. You might wonder why. It might be a mother bear with little one, and there's no run to it. You just will to give us the right of way. 'Cause I've tried it out. Come very near getting killed 2 or 3 times with a mother, so I'm afraid of them. I just leave them alone, and they can have the right of way. And one time I watched one teaching the little ones to climb, and she first goes up herself a little ways and then come back down. I wasn't here grunting to them, you know, but I don't know what them grunts meant. But anyway, she picked the little one up and just put it up on the side of the tree, and it went up a pace and then come back, just like she did. Then she got hold of the second one and put it up on the tree, and it just stuck there. Wouldn't even go and drink her. She'd just come over with her forepaw and let him have it right in the rear end. Cub like to run out the top of the tree, just a squalling and crying.
They cry just like a baby, don't they?
Lord, it's like a baby, and I wondered now what in the world will happen. And I'll never see my darling anymore. She's right here, though, by my side. Hi-oh-lee, oh-lee, oh-lee.
High above the twisting valleys, they doze in the clouds, marking time by the century. Sometimes they seem to be ghosts on the gray horizon, shrouded in mist like an old man's memories. From the coves and valleys, hard-top roads wind quickly to the topmost peaks, leading the stranger up and up to the towers of the Blue Ridge, Unakas, and Smokies. These are highways in the real sense. The Blue Ridge Parkway, Skyline Drive, and trails cut high in the Great Smokies National Park. The man going up meets the cold, sparkling creek tumbling down. Down over timeless rock and swiftly through the forest. To the sheltered pool where the fisherman casts the fly to bright speckled trout. The highlands are wildflower gardens. Dogwood, laurel, azalea, trillium, trailing arbutus, and rhododendron. 200 kinds of native plants. All this was waiting when man came into the highlands. First the Cherokee Indian, then the Spaniard hunting treasure, then the Scotch-Irish, German, and Huguenot settlers in search of home sites. They came nearly 200 years ago, cleared the wilderness to build log cabins, fought the forest for cropland, then settled down, walled in from the rest of the world. This is the story of their descendants, of people who still live by simple, honest values in a world grown complicated all around them. The man who never strays from the highway will never learn the story or know the soul of the highlands. It lies farther back, in homes hidden deep in the hollow.
A hill child starts life with just about what his father and grandfather had. Pure air, pure water, and a far view from the front porch of his father's house.
Cradled in the loving embrace of the Great Smoky Mountains lies Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Welcome to Gatlinburg, and welcome to all of the fun and the festivities that the Four Seasons harbor in this premier vacation destination. Gatlinburg is big enough to contain it all, yet small enough to retain its country charm. Gatlinburg is one of a kind. Where else will you find water wheels and waterfalls right in the heart of town? The countryside of Gatlinburg's character is reflected in many of her fine restaurants. Here, in a rustic hearthside setting, you might expect to find fresh, tender trout on your platter. The Candy Kitchen is certainly a visual treat for passers-by who stop to soak up the tempting aromas and to marvel at the intricacies of a toffee wrapping machine. The effect is almost hypnotic, and you just never know what you'll see next. Bears are characteristically strong of will and single-minded in every purpose, especially where food is concerned. The object of his desires may seem just beyond his grasp, or should we say, he can just barely reach it. But if persistence doesn't pay, ingenuity will. For as everyone expects, Smart Bear gets a ladder.
No, your dad, he had a lot to do with the promotion of Gatlinburg. Didn't he take people up in the mountains?
One time I went to promote them too with Dad to Chicago.
Really?
We went on a train, and that was the first time I'd ever been away from home, much, overnight.
And what would you do? Go and talk to people about Gatlinburg and about the Smoky Mountains?
Some people who was tourists, I bought a little strip with their money for them down here, and they wanted me to come with that, so they kept me while I was there. But we went to the meeting, and everybody just took a fit over, we call say take a fit over Dad.
Sure.
They enjoyed him so much.
Of course.
And then they kept asking me and the people and the tourists, people that I bought the Lucas, they kept asking them all about the mountains and everything. So really, we were good advertising, and they sent that a lot of places I didn't go in Harvey. Harvey went with them with his music, mountain music. I think God give people gifts, and if they didn't use them, why, you'd lose them. So he gave me a gift of gab, and I just keep using it.
Well, I know you're never...
I like to chuckle.
You're never supposed...
I like that. I like to make people chuckle.
What was the first business that you were involved with that you started in Gatlinburg?
First, I hired about 35 women that wove for me and made towels, and I shipped those everywhere. I bought the material and let them have it on credit, and they'd take the money that I paid them for the towels and go over to my husband's store and spend it for groceries. So it worked good both ways.
Good, good. Tell me about the Ogle store, the market.
Well, that was handed down from one generation to another, about 3 or 4 generations.
Was it the only grocery store and the first grocery store?
No, my daddy had one.
He had one first.
My daddy had a grocery store, and he had one.
Tell me a little bit about Charlie and when you guys first started dating.
Well, he's awful bashful. And he was an awful fine person, Charlie was.
And did he have a store, and did you have a store too?
His daddy had a store, and my daddy had a store. And we had a playhouse together when we was little children. And he'd go over to his daddy's store and get, advertising pictures and things like that to go on the walls. And we had a real home together before we was married.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Which was your motel?
The Bearskin.
Tell me some stories about it. I'm sure you've got several.
Well, I went in debt for it, I know that. And I slept on the laundry floor to rent my apartment to the tourists.
That's amazing. That's great.
And over the next 4 or 5 years, we built her 6 apartments because every summer she'd move down to the basement and sleep in the laundry room on a rollaway. And that's where we've changed, because there's very few of the people now that own and operate their businesses on their property.
Well, she lived, if the tourists leave another room, she stayed there and charged $35 a night for her apartment and slept in the laundry room.
And when my son got in the motel business, first thing I did was buy him a brand new rollaway and took it out and told him that story.
Tell me about Hattie.
Hattie McGiffin Ogle is the most interesting lady. She's the daughter of the squire of the town at the time when we were, young.
Yeah.
And Hattie was one of the persons in Gatlinburg that led out in crafts. She had her craft shop behind Ogle's grocery store.
Where the
At the
mall
same
is,
time, her husband, Charles Ogle, had the grocery store. And from there, Hattie expanded, and Hattie nearly owns half of Gatlinburg now.
I used to, always when I say that to you, I always think
And I like sense of humor instead of solemn things. I better just switch in and say this. I could sell little jugs at my shop if I'd put cops in them and then set them in the moonlight on that, and the tourists would come along and they'd say, aren't those cute little jugs? And I'd have some with stoppers and some without. And they'd start putting them in. I said, oh, no, don't do that. I'm catching moonshine in it. And they didn't lie, did they? It's a moonshine, didn't it? See that?
He bought a piece of land down where Rocky Waters Motel is now.
Yeah.
And at that time it had some buildings on it, and he bought those buildings in order to, and gave the land to the city. Well, it wasn't a city at that time.
Yeah, community.
In order that the road could be widened.
Mm-hmm.
And he tried to get the road 6 widths, six spaces, but did well to get it 4.
He bought land, or land that he owned, I know he gave to the Park Service.
True.
He helped buy the land that Pi-Phi came into and developed a settlement school. Was your dad a commissioner or a mayor or anything like that?
My father never went in for politics. This was something that he had no part in. He was always there for advice. The day that his funeral was held, schools were dismissed, stores were closed all over town. People mourned. Church wouldn't hold the flowers. They had about 3 big things full of flowers outside. And some very famous and, people from a distance away came. It was the biggest funeral that ever been in Gatlinburg. And more people seemed touched by it,
And I have never in my life spent any nicer days, I think, in my life I did at the Mountain View Hotel for 40 years. We met beautiful people. We had raised 3 daughters there. They worked in the kitchen, worked in the dining room, clean rooms. In those days we had a hard time keeping a lot of labor, but the girls worked through it, especially to the summer months. And we had many, many conventions that met at the Mountain View Hotel. Knox County Principals Association probably was our first group that met as a convention. And we didn't like to call them convention because the old timers, our old guests, loved them. They'd say, Tom, what kind of convention you got coming in tomorrow? We want to come down and stay about a month. I'd say, we don't have conventions anymore, we have meetings. They liked that word better than conventions, and we thought it went over better because meetings don't sound as much like convention air is going to come in and blow up the top and so forth. But we promoted tourism. We were very close to Bart Leeper, and he was a Chamber of Commerce man at that time. Zeno Wall was one of my best friends, and he was a chamber man. And Miss Hattie Hogue was on the board at the same time I was.
Probably the real start was after World War II, and people started traveling a little bit. There was gasoline and automobiles, and you could get tires, and people started to travel. Before that, our tourism was a dozen people coming from Knoxville to get out of the heat and stay in the mountains for a while.
Now, I've heard stories, maybe you can tell me if they're true or not, that Gatlinburg used to have touring cars, and they used to go and pick up people and bring them here trying to promote tourism. Is that a fact?
All the hotels had Cadillac convertibles. Each one of them had 2 or 3 Cadillacs, and they not only went to Knoxville and picked them up, but in the mornings people would get up and have breakfast at the hotel, and they'd pack a lunch, and the tour driver would take them up on the mountain, and they'd have their picnic and view the mountains out of their Cadillac.
The people just hit her pretty rough.
when it come to making a living, and if you got a tater and weight, you're done pretty well.
Although we had a depression, but no one in the mountains knew it. It didn't change a thing in the world. We didn't have a damn thing to begin with. Still didn't have anything.
Right. I remember the depression days.
We have another traditional toy with us. That's the old-time lumberjack or dancing man. And he does a little more than just sort of sit around. He works best to some good old-time mountain dance music. Let's have some good old-time dance music.
And some of the things we did were very much fun. Now, we were saying that Squire Maple's home back would be now located where the Wax Museum is on the main thoroughfare.
It's right in the middle of Gatlinburg.
Squire had a barn in back of his home. There we went every fall, and we climbed up into the second floor and pulled the shucks off of the corn, and we played games. We made games out of it. There were many red ears of corn hidden among the other ears, and any boy that found a red ear of corn could kiss his girlfriend. Now, this is one of the things that we did.
Kind of
Another
old
thing,
version of Russian roulette.
Yes. Another thing we did much ice skating. The river was frozen over most of the winter. The river was about twice as wide as it is now.
Okay, so it didn't run as much.
No, it was stood there.
I just haven't seen enough winter here to freeze anything.
We practically had frozen ice on the river, and we did much skating.
Well, that's interesting.
And then we skated with handmade sleds off the hills.
Wooden?
Wooden sled.
I cooked for Liberace after his shows. I thought, I don't believe I can do this, because there was a big band come in with his costumes and his piano, and I thought, oh boy, I can't handle this. But somebody had to feed him, and I cooked for him in my little kitchen. And he was, I was worn out because I was working 16, 18 hours a day, but before I got through the meal, I had my shoes kicked off and was cooking barefooted. He was that easy to be with. He was a wonderful personality.
We had the Governor's Conference banquet was held at the Mountain View Hotel. We had the front porch full of governors and their wives. The lobby was full, and the dining room. So we had a mighty big crowd.
I worked at the New Gatlinburg Inn then during the Governor's Conference. And all them purple Fords are running around here. We had different dinners at different restaurants. At the Greystone, we had a barbecue, I believe, over there. We had a sit-down dinner at the New Gatlinburg Inn. And then we had state dinner, I believe, was at the Mountain View Hotel. For all the governors and their wives, and there's a lot of people came with the governors. I got out of grammar school, and the year the war was over, and I come to Gatlinburg to work. Ms. Moffitt came down to the house and wanted me to come to work. They needed help real bad. So I was already working at the M&OT room, but it was, back then, that was close to the Riverside Hotel. And I think the M was Moffitt and the O was for Ogles. I'm not sure. It's been so many years ago, I've forgotten. But we had a house, a cabin there right on the main road that we lived in. And she wanted us to be in at a certain time. So we'd go down to the square dances of the night. We'd go up to Uncle Tubby's on Airport Road. We'd see how many people was up there. And then we'd go down to Grady's on the lower end of town to see how many people was down there, and dates a couple of times, and then we'd go back to the cabin because she wanted us to be in like 10:30 or 11. Because we had to get up and go to work the next morning at 6:30 to be open by 7.
When Ms. Moffett got too old to run it, that's what I understand. I rented it from Tom Oak. And eventually it became, I guess, one of the largest gift stores in the Southeast. When they said 7, I wound up building it into 17,000 square feet, and I had 75 rocking chairs out on the front of it. People could sit in, and it got to be famous. And the old well, we kept it there, and the Shriners maintained it and took and get the money for the Sevier County chapter.
There was a big tank down there, a concrete tank, and we had to get down in there and get the money, and they'd throw it in there, but it was for the crippled children. And we got down there and got the money out every fall, and we washed it and cleaned it up and had to road it and fix it, and Miss Moffett gave to the crippled children.
You know, when I opened the shop, I went to Dallas to buy, and the lady that was supposed to help me down there, I just met her that day, and that night she saw walking spring rain. She said, "That lady is the one I'm working with." She came back the next day, she said, "Was you in a movie?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I saw you last night."
You were in the movie?
Mm-hmm. I was trying to think of the fellow I danced with. I can't remember his name right now.
The big tall guy.
Quinn. Anthony Quinn? No. I just don't know.
It wasn't him. Yeah.
Fritz Weaver was one of them.
Fritz Weaver was who I was supposed to dance with. I danced with Fritz Weaver.
Up at the ski lodge.
Yeah, they're both Weaver and
Frida and I was at that last dance at the ski lodge. And Frida was in that thing several times.
There was a lot of locals in it.
Yeah, I was in that.
Oh, boy, they bought a lot of stuff from me. They bought a vase, if you remember, and then they go down the street and drop it, broke it. And they'd come in there and buy another one of them vases from me.
He wasn't very pleasant, Anthony Quinn.
No, he wasn't nice at all.
But she was. Ingrid Bergman was very nice.
She was. She's a fine lady.
But Anthony Quinn was tough. He was at the Riverside.
Well, they had to make
him out. He got him a house.
Yeah.
He said, "I don't want to move. I'm going to stay here." And Jim said, "No, you're not. I'm renting your house."
I remember Jim told me that's exactly what it was. He said, "I'm going to get him out of there."
Well, he complained about everything.
Funeral procession while we were in.
You were in a funeral procession?
In this same movie, Walk in the Spring Rain.
Okay.
Anthony Quinn. And I thought I'd try to be kind of smart. I walked up to him one day while Anthony Quinn's he was on the set. There was a big legal pad and he's writing all the time. I said, "How you like our nice Gatlinburg in this country and so forth?" He ain't answered me today. He ain't said nothing. I just got out of his way. But he was tough. He really was to get along with.
Rail felt that the tourists we needed more for people to do. And he mortgaged every inch of property he had to borrow money to build Hunter Hills Theater, and then set it up as a non-profit thing. The proceeds were to go for whatever was good for Gatlinburg. But at that time, everybody was running full. They were renting rooms in private homes and sleeping in cars. We had 10 Singer sewing machines going for 10 weeks in the basement of the hotel. We sewed up over 5,000 yards of material to make the costumes. Well, John, you all ever watch Northern Exposure? John Cullum, the older man who had the young wife, he played the lead in our show once the summer before he went to New York. And the first job he landed was understudy to Richard Burton in Camelot. So you know the rest of the story. He's won 2 Tonys on Broadway. And I saw him last summer. He was 23 or 24 when he was in our show, and he was at Clarence Brown Theater at UT last summer. And I went to see him. He and his son played in The Dresser. He's 73, and his son was the same age he was when he was in our show. And after the performance, John presented me with a dozen red roses. I was so touched. It was one of the nicest things that ever happened to me.
Grew up in the Smoky Mountain area,
And I'm a mountaineer, and I'm akin to everybody that is anybody in Gatlinburg. Reckon we're cousins or uncles or distant cousins. Most of the Ogles, Reagans, and McCarters and Claybos, we're all inter cousins. The family's intermarried. And
That's what
I'm
I
a
understand.
mountaineer.
My Grandma Ogle done weaving, but Grandma Ogle made this fan. And I don't know how long ago, maybe, well, I'd say back in the 20s or 30s or something, and it's made out of white oak. Back then they didn't have air conditioning, so these fans was really something good to have. You used these instead of having air, well, because you didn't have air conditioning. Yeah, they took fans to church and everywhere. And his great-grandfather was Davy Crockett Maples. So Davy Crockett, he was going across the mountain and got his legs frostbitten, and they sawed his legs off, and he made himself some new legs. So maybe that's when the woodworking started in that family. I don't know.
My parents are both from here. My mother was from Gatlinburg. My father was from Walden's Creek. But we were living in Kentucky when I was 8 years old, and my father purchased what is now Twin Islands across the street. It was called Pleasure Island then, and the only entrance was down where Ruby Tuesdays is. And it had 21 little cabins scattered all over the two islands, and we had snakes in the middle, trees and snakes in the middle. And so we moved there when I was 8 years old, and we rented all those cabins, and I would take the tourists over to Wiley Oakley's shop, and on the screened-in back porch, his son would play music, and we'd sit on just little benches, and that was interesting. I would have fun talking to all the tourists, and I guess they probably were making fun of my language, but I don't know. But I enjoyed it. We dammed up the creek and went swimming, and it was like a whole different world. And then we'd cross the bridge and come up here, and there was a church and the school. And in 1950, my father built, and his brother built the new bridge at this end, and built a office and a couple of rooms. And then the 1951 flood sort of took it all away. I could go to school and said, well, the dog didn't get my homework, but the flood did. Washed my homework away, because I would sit there at night and do my homework. And so my mother said, that's it, I'm out of here. So they moved over to what was Roaring Fork Road then, which is 321 now, and built another small motel. But it was so idyllic to grow up there. It seemed, I don't remember a lot before, but that seems like most of my growing up was there on the island. And we'd come over across the street. I couldn't go swimming every year in the creek until I came over and Miss Chalmers gave me my typhoid shot. And of course, on the way to school, if you had a sore throat, you stopped and she painted your throat and you never got sick.
"70 years ago, my father, William Steele, Bill Steele, opened a drugstore. Well, actually a sundry store across the street. In 1940, he came here from Asheville. And we had a drugstore that was the local hangout till 1955. It was just a wonderful place. It's changed so much today, but I get real nostalgic when I come here, because he put me to work when I was 12. I've been working a long time. But our store, Kevin, was right there where Corky's is. I think all of Corky's is brand new. There's nothing left there of our drugstore or sundries. But anyway, and the Hard Rock was the Ogle Buffet, and I'm not exactly sure when they came. I didn't pay that much attention. But that Riverbend Mall was just a beautiful grassy branch, grassy hill, and it was full of jonquils. I'd pick jonquils there every spring. It was so wonderful. But my father He would pull up here and he would back his car up in this little road where it's now big. His big old Buick, 48 Buick he had later. And he'd park it on the hill and then he would start it without starting the engine. And he taught me how to do that by letting the clutch out. I'm sure some of you old timers know how to do that, but that building up there where that little awning is, I believe was the barber shop forever. Arthur Ogle and Huey, and I would go in there and sit sometimes and just hang out. I'm sure they were tired of me hanging out. We didn't have a pharmacy in our sundries store, but we had magazines and toothpaste and Hadacol, and they called him Doc still. And I guess because they'd come in and say, I hurt right here, Doc, what can I do? And he'd suggest something that they buy, but of course he couldn't prescribe anything. His daddy would say, cigars, cigarettes, anything else, razor blades. He taught me how to sell, which turned out to be a good thing. Felt very safe and secure here in Gatlinburg with parents who loved each other and lots of brothers and sisters. Of course, I wanted to be an only child, but I didn't get my wish, and I'm really glad I didn't. So I'm glad I had no control over that. There were 6 children, and Mom and Dad, and I have 3 wonderful sisters, and I had 2 brothers. My older brother passed away in 1980, a result of an automobile accident. But I have a little brother, Ed. He's always going to be my little brother. But we had a great family, and I always felt like my father was very respected here. I don't know, I just had good feelings about him. It's changed so much, and yet in many ways it's still the same to me. But I have very fond memories of this city that I love and the people in it.
So when I was growing up, the parkway, you had the strips of grass and the beautiful dogwood trees, and then the sidewalk. I knew almost every person that owned a business along the strip, up and down the strip. Used to ride my bicycle, roller skate, it didn't matter. It's amazing. But my mother wanted me to talk about her father, E.E. Maples. He had the Maples Cottages at the south end of Gatlinburg, where Calhoun's and Cherokee Grill is now. But I can remember different things. I used to stand across the street and wanted to go visit with my grandparents, so my mother would stand beside me and I'd have a little suitcase, and Nan and Papa would be on the other side of the street, and they'd wait for the cars to clear out and let me cross the street with my little suitcase to go and spend the night. And then I remember too, and something that you all haven't mentioned, Gatlinburg used to roll its sidewalks up the 1st of November and not put them back down to the 1st of April. Everybody used to go to Florida. They would stay there for almost 6 months. That's why I know Ruth used to do that, Hattie and Bud, Blanche. And then along the same lines, we had a motel. My parents had a motel across the street where the tramway is now, the Hemlock Motel. And I remember being told, I can't remember this, just being told, my grandfather had 2 old frame houses sitting on his property, and they were getting ready to tear them down, so they allowed us to move one across the street, and we remodeled it. And you may remember this too, but we put the office for the Hemlock Motel in the front of one of those old houses, and I think it belonged, I don't know if it was E.E. Ogles or if it was the other way, but when, like Glenn was talking earlier, my family on the Maples and the Whaleys and the Ogles go all the way back to that Martha Jane Husky Ogle that came in here, and we're descended from at least 4 of her children. It's like you say your family tree doesn't fork, it doesn't fork.
I've had a the privilege of being born, raised in Gatlinburg. Of course, I've seen a lot of changes. I've probably built a lot of them. I've been a licensed contractor for 50 years. That's hard to believe. I can almost drive a nail now. But later on, in the 40s, we had the Maple swimming pool on Airport Road. It was the only pool in Gatlinburg. They had one at Greenbrier, but we had the Maple swimming pool. And we had that for years. In the 50s or early 60s, we converted this into the motel, which is now called the Sidney James Mountain Lodge. Dolly's uncle used to work for us, Bill Owens, and Dolly would come up there, and I think her fee was 25 cents. You could swim all day for a quarter. Dolly didn't have the quarter to get in, and we used to let her in for nothing, because her uncle worked for us. Come up there quite often.
That's because you were.
Now I'd hate to think what Dolly could buy and sell me how many times, I don't know. I think I'm about building her for that quarter, though.
So I growed up in it's a great Smoky Mountain National Park now. I was born at Elk Mine. And I rode horses to the river to get a drink, and then we rented them to tourists. And my dad run the post office and a grocery store. And we had all kinds of fun.
Who was your dad?
Robert Tranum. And my grandpa was the prophet of the Smokies, Levi Tranum. And he cussed every time he opened his mouth nearly. It was full of Knoxville people, had summer homes up there. We didn't have toilets, we had to go outside. And it's cold too.
Tell Kevin what you did to your daddy's.
Oh yeah, I shouldn't have done it. He wore this long underwear with the back, pull it out. I sewed that up one time, and he went out, and he was in a hurry, and it was cold, and I'd sewed it up, and he thought he was never going to get out of it. He said, come in, and he said, I believe somebody sorry tried to pull a joke on me, but he didn't whip me for it. I had Hobie's Little Brown Jug down in town and Hobie's Copper Still. We had two, and it kept us busy. He'd open the door for me if we went anywhere. I said, Hobie, they won't think you're my brother by opening. He said, I'm a gentleman. I opened the doors, and women really liked him, because he'd buy them something, and he'd give away a lot of little kids $1 to spend. Never married, huh? I don't know why. He just didn't get married. Hobie could play anything he picked up. Could play the guitar, French harp. Then we made sing-alongs. Me and my wife and a stump-tailed dog crossed the creek on a hickory log. The log was thick and I fell in. I lost my little brown jug right then. Him and my brother and two more men built a Space Needle over in town. And boy, it brought people to Gatlinburg.
Isn't it time to let your world unwind? In Gatlinburg. Isn't it time to find your piece of sky? In Gatlinburg. Time to come home to the Smokies for the first time. Or again, touch the magic in mountain hearts, in mountain hands. Isn't it time, don't you deserve just a little Gatlinburg?
Gatlinburg, Tennessee. We built an entire city for your next vacation, and we built it beautifully. So come and spoil yourself in the heart of the Smoky Mountains. In Gatlinburg, Tennessee, America's favorite vacation city.
Those of us who love to ski thrill at the thought we can ski in any season. You can ski and soak up the warm sun all at the same time. artificial snow is the answer. We've carpeted an entire mountain slope with summer snow. Michael Russell is a freestyle skier who has elevated the fine art of skiing to the realm of dance. Now we can ski as easily in July as we can in January. Today, the candle maker's craft has been refined into art, as candle dippers create fanciful designs almost too pretty to burn. John Cowden personifies all the romance of sitting on your front porch and whittling.
Well, I started carving when I was very young. My father, he's a wood carver, so he carved, and I grew up with it and picked it up.
Well, every morning in Gatlinburg, long before dawn, Aunt Grace rolls in down at the Burning Bush restaurant and rolls out some biscuits. And not just any biscuits, mind you, but the best biscuits in the world. These biscuits are the cornerstone of a bountiful country breakfast fit for a hungry mountaineer. Gatlinburg's community corral festoons the living Christmas tree. And for a time, all is calm, all is bright.
We would like to introduce to you the former mayor and who is now chairman of the Bicentennial Commission. Can you give a nice hand, please, for George Hawkins, please? You get 2 microphones, George.
All right, okay. One goes to Jim and one goes to John.
What is this?
Okay.
Come to me, anything you wanted, I'd try to tell you. You want a jug of moon, John, I could tell you where the bootlegger was. That's usually good for a dime tip.
Ann Garfield.
Now for me, the parade has officially begun. Garfield Schultz traditionally leads our parades in Gatlinburg, and we got something to tell you about Garfield that maybe not a whole lot of people know. Garfield Schultz is a genuine 100% American war hero. He's kind of looked on as a local character, but Garfield is a highly decorated veteran of World War II, and we are real proud to have him. Good evening, my friend.
You were actually here working on a project, and Rocky Top just sort of happened.
Well, that's we were here working on an Archie Campbell project, The Golden Years, and if you have to work in that vein, there's a lot of culling that you have to do. You have to cull out the falling apart of the golden years. And I said to Boudleaux, I said, I'm sick of this. I'm getting arthritic. I said, I think I'm growing gray hairs on this project. I said, let's write something happy up. And Boudleaux always believed in, he had tunnel vision. Zero in on a thing, get that target the heck out of the way, and get on with it. Well, as you can tell interviewing me, that I scatter in a hurry. And so I'm scattering real big here. And I said, no, I can't do another thing on this Golden Years project. I need something up and happy. And so he knew that when I was hit with a case of the dumps, he couldn't cut through it, so he went along with it. And he started it. He even titled it. And in about 10 minutes we were through with it, and he says, now can we get on with the rest of this job? And then he proceeds to forget all about it.
All the guys, thank you very much. And Sonny Bobby saying good night, please. Rocky Top, Tennessee.
Years ago, one of the first gentlemen I met when I came to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, was who? Zeno Wall. Zeno, come up here a minute. You're going to stand right there, and I'm going to say some very nice things about you. You don't mind, do you?
Does it cost much?
It won't cost you much. No, not at all. Let me tell you about this gentleman. Most of you know about him anyway. He's not only the father of tourism, he invented it. He really did. And I've been with him on travel shows, and a lot of you have out here in this audience today, and I've seen him operate, and he's one of the best salesmen I've ever seen. If you don't believe it, go down the main street of Gatlinburg and come on 407 exit and look at all these thousands and millions of tourists who come to our area every day. Let's give him a hand one more time, Zeno Wall. A one of a kind. He's got the picture down there, Zeno. How about that?
the Smoky Mountain smoke get in your eyes. Don't let the Smoky Mountain smoke get in your eyes. If you do, I'm telling you, you wanna live there the rest of your life. That Smoky Mountain smoke is in your eyes. If you're looking for a place, you will love Smoky Mountain, Cherokee. The closest place to heaven that I know of, Smoky Mountain, Tennessee. Don't let the Smoky Mountain smoke it in your eyes. If you do, I'm telling you, you wanna live there the rest of your life. That Smoky Mountain smoke is in your eyes. Don't let Smoky Mountain smoke it in your eyes. If you do, I'm telling you, you won't live there the rest of your life. It's Smoky Mountain smoke is in your eyes. It's Smoky Mountain smoke is in your eyes.
Of old Smoky, all covered with snow. And once you have come here, you'll never want to go. On top of old Smoky, all covered with snow.
Here we can sit on the back porch of all those yesterdays and gaze back down the pathways we've come along and marvel at the rivers we've spanned, the forests we've left, the campfires we've kept, and the living and the dying that we've done to get here. Yesterday and tomorrow converge in every sunset. Days do not end in the Great Smoky Mountains. Ages begin. Gatlinburg invites you to come on over to the mountains. Aunt Grace will fix you some biscuits.
That's right.
Smoky Mountain, smoke it in your eyes. If you do, I'm telling you, you wanna live there the rest of your life. If Smoky Mountain smoke is in your eyes. Gatlinburg, precious jewel, mountain treasure, Smoky Mountain paradise. You want to live in the Smokies forever, Smoky Mountain, smoke in your eyes. Don't let the Smoky Mountain smoke it in your eyes. If you do, I'm telling you, you wanna live there the rest of your life. That Smoky Mountain smoke, it's in your eyes. That Smoky Mountain smoke, it's